Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Welcome to this week's Mental Monday. So this week, I want to take a break from the burnout series and kind of give myself time to work through that a little more, and then we can revisit it, look at what's worked, look at what hasn't, and go from there. I actually want to talk about what I believe to be a very fun topic today. There has been an influx of movies about different mental health topics recently. So I want to talk about mental health in the media. Now, you might be thinking, Brooke, don't you want people talking about mental health more? Duh. But I want it happening in a good way, in a constructive way, in a way that spreads awareness and healthy, constructive information that can actually help people, rather than spreading either false pictures of what it's like or glamorizing it and making it look like it's no big deal. So there's a balance to find with it, and there have been two major Netflix projects recently that have come out that discuss pretty intense major mental health topics that have become very popular and have been getting a lot of buzz, and that is 13 Reasons Why, which I've talked about. If you want to see my video on that, click that link in the iCard. Trigger warning: if you deal with any of the topics that show deals with, discern for yourself if you want to delve any deeper into that or anything. I do discuss the topics. And there was a new one recently since I made that video called To the Bone that is about eating disorders, and I think it shows. I actually have not watched it. I have to say, I have not watched it. I'm planning to watch it. I just have not found a good time where I'm mentally ready to watch it, and I'm not already mentally exhausted from everything else. I don't think that's an aspect of movies that people ever think about. Like, it can mentally exhaust you also. Anyways, I have not seen it yet, but it discusses eating disorders, and it specifically shows one girl's story with, I think, anorexia and bulimia. I think both, if not anorexia, I think. So it discusses that. I know it shows her going through treatment. I know it shows her family kind of getting involved and trying to help her. And from what I have heard, it shows pretty realistically, pretty scarily, the effects both mentally and physically of an eating disorder. Eating disorders are not something I have talked about on here yet. I myself have never personally struggled with one, so I have not had the experience to speak from, and as I talk about this today, I have not had any experience to speak from. I really want to focus more on how the media handles it. I feel like there is a major culture switching now to using that mental health tag, that disorder tag, as a gimmick. And I don't mean that the work they're doing isn't valuable, and I don't mean that they have bad intentions. I know they have good intentions. The either director or producer or both on To the Bone had personally struggled with eating disorders. So what they were producing, they had directly experienced, and they knew what it was like. And the actress that played the main character also had previously struggled with an eating disorder. And so I know that I've seen a lot of articles talking about how they handled that with her, and how they were really helpful and really careful with how they had her portray that as far as physically goes, like how much weight they had her lose, things like that I've read different articles about how they handled it. I personally, I've seen another person's review of that movie, and the very last point and the only critique of the film she had, as she's a mental health professional, she is a marriage and family therapist that specializes in eating disorders. She said her only critique with the movie was that they had somebody that had previously struggled with an eating disorder play that girl, and she had to lose weight for it to look the part. And so they had her lose the weight, and she said she really disliked that just because of the kind of playing with fire aspect of it, because those mental wounds are still there. Even if you've recovered from it, it's like an alcoholic. An alcoholic is always an alcoholic. Recovered or not, if they get a little bit, they are even more predisposed to have a problem with it than they were the first time they had a problem with it and picked up alcohol. It's already in their brain chemistry. Their brain knows how to do it, and it can do it easily, and it could spiral far worse out of control. And eating disorders, just like alcohol and addiction, is not something to mess with. You don't play with it, you don't bait it, you leave it alone and you stay away from it. It's not something that's forgiving. And I know personally from friends that I've had and experiences I've seen them walk through, recovery from an addiction and an eating disorder is an addiction of sorts. Eating disorders are all about having control over something. You don't feel control over anything else in your life, and so you control your eating habits because that's what you have control in and that's what you have say in. And you almost become addicted to that. You become obsessive about how many calories you're eating. You become obsessed with what foods you're eating. You become obsessed with how often you're eating. And it starts that obsessive thinking, and it really is its own kind of addiction. But I have seen friends go through addiction of other kinds. It was not easy for them to get out of it. It was not a turn off, turn on type of thing. It was not one little scare and they were done. It took a lot for them to get to that point, and it took quite a toll on them physically that they had to recover from. So it is not something to mess with. That being said, I actually do really want to applaud the effort recently that has gone into talking more about mental health. And I think that's why, for me, the media's way of handling mental health is kind of a win some, lose some. Some of those are not going to be great because it's going to be done in a way that glamorizes it. It's going to be done in a way that doesn't get the message across. It can be done in a way that doesn't give out resources for people that struggle with it and doesn't handle it carefully enough or understand the disease or disorder carefully enough to portray it correctly. Both of the films that I'm mentioning in this video, I feel like do a really good job of showing the realities of it. I saw a lot of critiques of 13 Reasons Why saying that it glamorized suicide, that it over-dramatized certain aspects of it, that the reasons that she gave were really petty, and just critiques like that talking about how they handled it, and that they did it in a really gratuitous way, that it was over the top, it was way too gruesome, and they did not need to do it in that way. While I agree that you need to be careful how you handle these things and how you depict certain aspects of it, because having that scene be so gruesome was not fully necessary. They could have done it in a different way, and it would have gotten the message across differently, but it could have gotten the message across. I know I've seen a lot of talk that they do it in those fashions because it makes the message clearer. It makes a bigger impact. My point about 13 Reasons Why, and the point I want to make about mental health in the media at all, is as long as you are sticking to what is true about that mental health issue, whether it's suicide, depression, sexual abuse, eating disorders, as long as you are depicting it in the realistic fashion that it happens, you're not making it look easier than it is. You're not giving the character an easy way out. You aren't showing it in a light that doesn't give the reality of it and doesn't show the consequences, doesn't show the damage it doesn't honestly depict how somebody can get to that point, because I think understanding mental health doesn't mean just understanding what somebody's struggling with. It's understanding how they got to be struggling with it. So it's understanding the source of it. So Into the Bone, the source of her eating disorder and how she got there and how she's trying to deal with it. And that reality, from what I have heard, is really depicted very well. And I think that is an example of something that will help the discussions about mental health rather than making it a gimmick. It creates conversation that needs to happen. It creates a safe space for us to talk about body image and self-image and confidence and health in general, let alone mental health, and how we're taking care of ourselves. And with 13 Reasons Why, my biggest critique with that was it was very gratuitous. It was very shock and in your face with how scary and violent and just horrific all of those things are. My argument for 13 Reasons Why is it really does depict the realities of somebody dealing with depression and suicidal thoughts and how they're going to deal with it. It doesn't show how other people around them should deal with it very well. It touches on it, but not well enough, in my opinion. And it really does show how somebody's going to react to suicidal thinking, how somebody gets there. It's scary how well you understand why she got to where she got. And that is what's scary about that, but that's also the point of it. It's to scare you into thinking this could be anybody. It's not for the people you expect. It's not the people that look depressed, that are goth or emo, or that's a stereotype that is so unbelievably untrue. Anybody can struggle with those things. Anybody is vulnerable to that. Nobody's safe from it. And most of the time, it's the people that aren't showing you those signs that are struggling with it for both of those topics, whether it's depression and suicide or eating disorders. It's not always obvious. There aren't in-your-face signs all the time that they're dealing with it. And a lot of the time, they are able to get by for a while without you knowing anything. And that's how somebody can commit suicide, with the family members and loved ones thinking, I had no idea it had gotten that bad. And eating disorders can very easily get to the point of a parent saying, I knew she was having issues, but I didn't know it was that bad. And it can be he too. All of these mental health topics that I talk about, all of them can apply to male or female, eating disorders included. So I think my big disclaimer with mental health and media is to be careful of how it's put out there. Be careful of how it's portrayed. Making sure you're showing the reality of it instead of using it as just a plot line and a gimmick. There are people in the world that are seriously struggling with it, and that is not helping anybody to help them. But I want to commend those movies and shows that have done such a good job of waking people up and starting conversations and spreading different awareness about different topics. And I think that should continue. I think we all need to be very conscious and careful about how we're dealing with it, how we're facing it, how it's being depicted, but I think it is conversations that need to happen. And so I'm really glad that there's those that are at least making people talk, even if they don't watch the shows. I could see it starting conversations that are very good to have and opening up that line of communication. With that, I encourage everybody to find a good mental health video. I will link some of my favorite Netflix movies and YouTube videos about mental health. I'll also link Katie Morton's channel. She definitely has her own perspective on things, but I have learned a ton from her channel and her videos. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist, like I mentioned, and so I will link her channel as well if you would like to check it out. And if you have any mental health movies you would like me to check out and review and give my thoughts on, I would love to see those, so leave that in the comments below. If you liked this video, I hope this gave you a little insight into mental disorders and how they're handled in media. I hope this helped you in some way. If it did and you liked it, give it a thumbs up and share it with everybody. Click the screen and subscribe, and make sure you have the notifications bell clicked so you will get a notification when a new video goes live, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye!